All right, started.
What's up, everyone? Hope everyone's doing well. Let me just get all these social medias ready to go. I hope everyone's doing okay. Another week of football. We'll let people come in. Give everyone a couple moments to shuffle on in. Excited for another week of football, everyone.
Yeah, I think we got some big games this week.
Oh, yeah, we do. We do, and we're reaching that playoff time, so things are definitely moving ahead for us, but just got to unfortunately post these links on our socials, guys. Make sure everyone remembers that we're live. We're going to be got a packed show, like always. Appreciate it, you guys, as always, coming in, watching the show. Even when you come in afterwards, we always do appreciate you kind of watching, even if it's not live. It's very important, and glad we can bring some entertainment for you guys and showcase these kids and programs. All right, so let's dive into it, Mars. Again, thank you guys so much, as always, for joining us. Like usual, if this is your first time here, we're covering Section 1 football in the Hudson Valley Football League. This is our Week 6 preview. If you're returning, which I hope you are, again, appreciate you guys, as always. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. If you haven't yet already, hit that subscribe button to get notified for future content. Also want to really give a shout-out to our Patreon community. We thank all our supporters, appreciate all of you. Our Patreon community really helps us continue to grow as a group. So I want to give a shout out to them really quick as well. And how things are going to work, like usual, we're going to go over the schedule, the games on slate for Week 6 through all the classes and the Hudson Valley Football League. And then we're going to take, I'm going to start talking a little bit about the standings, because we only have, for some of the leagues, 2 weeks left in the regular season, right? I know C&D, they play an extra week. And I think the Hudson Valley Football League plays an extra week, but playoffs are right around the corner. So teams are vying for playoff spots. Teams that are kind of out of it are evaluating some of the younger players, and some of the seniors are playing their last bit of games. So much going on, Mars, but I want to welcome Mars in before we dive into it. And also, questions. We're going to be picking all the games, guys, so make sure you throw your questions in the chat. If it's a question like, hey, who do you have, so-and-so versus so-and-so, when we get to the game, we'll obviously answer that question. So, Mars, any quick thoughts before we dive further into it?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting close to the end of the season, so these are all kind of like, I consider them to be like money games, right? These are all games that you need to win to secure certain playoff spots. And for guys, for teams that aren't necessarily in playoff contention, this is like what they call like playing with house money. It's playing all in, you're nothing else to lose. You guys give everything you got to have kind of a positive end to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're evaluating young players, seniors playing their last games, a chance to upset teams and ruin their playoff chances. So there's a lot riding on everything. And so let's talk about the games on slate, Mars. And starting off with AA, we have Yonkers Brave at Arlington. This is a league matchup. John Jay East Fishkill at Mamaroneck. That's a very interesting one there. We'll talk about that. That's a league matchup as well. Mount Vernon at Ossining is a non-league matchup. We have Carmel at Yonkers Forest on a Friday afternoon game, which are always those are always tough games. It's like right after school. Suffern at Scarsdale is another interesting one. That's a league game. White Plains at North Rockland is a league game, and RCK at New Rochelle, which is a league game. I think we had a couple of these that go on local live as well, which is the Yonkers Brave, Arlington, East Fishkill, Mamaroneck, and White Plains North Rockland game. Those are on local live. When we get to A, we have Yorktown at Brewster in a league game. It's a big matchup right there. We have Mahopac at Fox Lane, Harrison at Horace Greeley. We have Clarkstown North at Pelham, Clarkstown South at Eastchester. To me, probably the most interesting one out of the A group. And Somers at John J. Cross River. And what I love about this is I think all these games are on local live. No, most of them are, not the Eastchester one, but which is always great. When we get to B, we have Irvington at Albertus Magnus. We have Nanuet at Hen Hud. We have Nyack at Lakeland. That one's very interesting. We have Sleepy Hollow at Pleasantville. Croton Harmon at Putnam Valley. Probably the game of the week, Mars. Ardsley at Rye is probably the game of the week for, I think, the entirety schedule. But that's an interesting one. Hastings at Briarcliff Hamilton Football Program. Byram Hills at Pearl River. Edgemont at Rhineck. And then when we get to C and D, we have Haldane at Valhalla, which C and D has kind of been my favorite, Mars. I don't know about you, but they've been my favorite division to watch. These teams are very competitive. They battle each other out. You got some upsets. You got some really great victories, but these teams are very even. And then we got Haldane at Valhalla is a very good matchup. Dobbs Ferry at Westlake, which is a rematch of last season's section title game. Bronxville at Woodlands. And then when we get to the Hudson Valley Football League, we have Port Chester at Tappan Zee, which is an interesting. Poughkeepsie at Walter Panis, and Ramapo at Peekskill. So those are the games on slate, guys. Kind of the next thing I want to talk about are the standings. And, last week, and Mars, just let me know if you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so last week, we talked about kind of how the playoff setup works. And just Mr. Tree, appreciate you for watching. Talking about Rhineck, we'll get to them when we get to the games. But talking about how the playoffs worked last time, and I'll kind of just talk about it really quickly again. For A and AA, it is the top 4 teams on each side, each league. For B is where things kind of get a little complicated. The top 8 teams, but they use a Piner system, which uses a multiplier based on the weight of strength of schedule, who they defeat, and the strength of schedule was determined off of preseason rankings. So that one's a little bit complicated. For C, it is the top 4 teams with the removal of Haldane and Tuckahoe, who play each other automatically. And then the Hudson Valley Football League, I didn't get final confirmation, but I'm assuming it's the top 4 teams that go there as well. And looking at the divisions in AA, right now, currently, we have Arlington and Suffern, both 4-0 in league play. Sitting on top, Arlington is 6-0, followed by Scarsdale and New Rochelle, who are both 2-2. But New Rochelle defeated Scarsdale, so they actually have the tiebreaker over them. So New Rochelle's at 3, Scarsdale's at 4, even though Scarsdale has a better overall record. But league record is the most important. And I believe that is the tiebreaker. First is head-to-head. Yeah, first tiebreaker is head-to-head, then overall record. When you go to then you follow it up by Mount Vernon, Ketchum, and Yonkers Brave. Mount Vernon is 2-3 in league play, so they still have an opportunity. When we go to the other side, Carmel's sitting up at the top at 4-0 in league play, 4-1 overall record. John Jay's Fishkill is sitting at 4-1. North Rockland and Mamaroneck both tied at 2-2 in conference play, and they are, again, that's John Jay's Fishkill and Mamaroneck makes things very interesting in that game with the standings. So followed by Ossining, that's 2-3, Yonkers Forest is 1-3, and White Plains is 0-4, and those are league records. Once we get to Mars, any quick thoughts before I move to the other?
I mean, right now you're looking at, like, let's just say that for the standings for like AA. I mean, I feel like Arlington's been kind of like running the league, but I feel like when you look at the other side, I mean, Carmel's been battling out. John Jay's Fishkill's been pretty impressive. But it's really going to be about these last few weeks, really, where those kind of outlines are going to be. I mean, every playoff system that we see right now for all the classes is pretty straightforward, except for B. B is probably the most complicated of them all because of the Piner system and everything. But but AA, I feel like is a pretty good tight matchup between some of these teams.
When you go to A, we have Yorktown and Somers, both 3-0 in league play, sitting up at the top, followed up by Mayapack, who's 1-2, Brewster, who's 1-2, and John Jay Cross River, who are all 1-2, and Fox Lane 0-3 in league play, but they still have an opportunity, we'll talk about it in their game, to make the playoffs as well. So there's a lot of turmoil between 3 to the bottom when you look at the A North League. When you get to the A South League, you have Harrison sitting up at top on 3-0 in league play, followed by Eastchester and Clarkstown South, both 2-1, and they play each other this week, which is going to be a huge indication on kind of seeding purposes, as Harrison has defeated both of them. But who gets the second seed there? Followed by Horace Greeley and Clarkstown North, both 1-2. But Clarkstown North, with the big upset last week, beat Greeley. So they have the tiebreaker over them, right? And then finally, Pelham below. When we get to B, which is the Piner system, which things get all weird, but I understand based on because there's 17 teams in B, and so you have to kind of create this system, and then there's kind of like the bigger schools and the smaller schools. But where the current standings are, and I hope Kevin Devaney's math is correct because I'm relying off of him for this update. But first is Pleasantville sitting at 1, Rye is sitting at 2, Ardsley is sitting at 3, Pearl River is sitting at 4. They had a nice jump from last week. Nanuet is sitting at 5, Nyack is at 6, Lakeland is at 7, and Byram Hills is at 8. And remember, top 8 go. Then it is followed up by Rhinebeck at 9, Putnam Valley at 10, Crow and Harmon at 11, and I'll just say the 12th one, which is Edgemont. Now, I know the Rhinebeck fans are probably listening to this and saying, how the heck can this be? Do we have a chance to get it? And I do, actually. We do have 2 weeks left. If Rhinebeck wins out, I think they get it. Mars, any quick thoughts? I think I passed you on A. Any quick thoughts on A and B?
No, I feel like between all the leagues that we were talking about in this video or this live stream, A definitely has a very interesting. I guess you would say with that League B within A, like that Section B or whatever you want to call it, Division B. They're very interesting, especially when it comes to a lot of those games. Obviously, Harrison's sitting on top right now, but seeing where South and Eastchester kind of lie is going to be the really big question. But even in B, like the whole Pioneer system can be very complicated. So it kind of can throw everyone into a loop depending on, how they handle, some of these last few games and which side of the, what side of the league they're going to be on. So it should be interesting either way. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be interested to see how these games kind of finalize here.
Yeah, and then let's wrap it off with, again, D, you have automatic that Haldane and Tucko play each other. But when you look at C, it's Westlake, Dobbs Ferry, Valhalla, and then Bronxville, and then Woodlands below them. And now Bronxville and Woodlands playing each other. They're both 0-3 in league play, so that's a huge matchup there for playoff purposes. But these teams are all going to be battling each other to determine the seeding. So, and then finally, the Hudson Valley Football League, you have Spring Valley at number 1, 5-0, followed by Tappan Zee, who's 4-1, Peekskill, who's 3-2, Port Chester, who's 2-3, and then Poughkeepsie, Ramapo, and Panis follow them in that order. So those are the standings, guys. There's still a lot of football left in these last couple of weeks. Going to open up this playoff picture pretty large. And now we're going to go into picking the games, Mars. So we went through the standings, talked about the schedule. Did you guys go through Class A? No, we just did, Benty. We just went over the standings. And if you missed anything, guys, don't worry. You can go back and rewatch it. But appreciate you guys joining as always. If you have questions, make sure you put it in the chat. Give that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that as well. Now we're going to go into our game picks. And Mars, I got to say, there's some of these school accounts or these fan accounts that these schools have that do some impressive work. I ain't going to lie. They create like sound bites and these little mini promo videos that I've been seeing up on Instagram. And I got to say, some of them do impressive work. I have to give them credit. So shout out to them. There's even some like Instagram wars I saw, which I'll talk about. I'll stir the pot a little bit when I go to the game. But
listen, I gotta say the best videos are the ones that either have mine or your quotes in. So
I know I love they're grabbing sound bites from us. That makes me happy. I'm not gonna lie. Even if it they're trying to make fun of me for a bad pick or a bad decision I make, I still appreciate it.
Listen, I
live a little rent free.
Yeah, listen, I think I've had some quotes that some teams have taken and they use it as like motivation for themselves. I had
I love it.
Some quotes. I had some quotes
That's
that
great.
people put to hype themselves up. So I mean, hey, if you're using me as motivation, then I'm fine with it. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Absolutely, and it's all good and fun. And I do see Smooth Criminal Shop, Poughkeepsie here. Appreciate you for watching the show. Shout out to you. So let's dive into it, Morrison. Last week we just started with the Hudson Valley Football League and went through the lower leagues up to the upper ones. Now we're going to go back. We'll do Double A all the way down to the Hudson Valley Football League. So we'll switch back and forth. So let's start in Double A. And the first one up, Yonkers Brave 0-6 at Arlington, who's 6-0. And a win by Arlington and a suffering loss will give Arlington a league title. So obviously huge ramifications in this game. When you look at Yonkers Brave, Mars, offensively, I thought they showed some spark these last couple of games. They scored 20-plus points. But defensively is where I'm very concerned in this one. They have given up 5 straight games of 30-plus points. So that's very concerning. When you look at Arlington, their quarterback Resigno has had a tremendous season, playing 2 ways, 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, Mars. That's a 7-to-1 ratio, a little more than 7. It's pretty damn good. And he also adds 7 rushing touchdowns. So he has been absolutely amazing so far this season. This offense has scored 30-plus points 6 games so far this year. Their running back Davenport's another one. He has over 500 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. This Arlington offense has 8 different receivers have receiving touchdowns, Mars. And it's led by Robbie Jordan, who's got 4 of them. But last week, Lavello, I thought, had a very strong game, both offensively and defensively. He was a real impactful two-way player. And look for Arlington to take advantage of this game very early, right? Running the ball, establishing the line of scrimmage with that offensive line and their size. And then defensively, guys like McGann is, he leads the team in tackles, making a bunch of plays. Finn is another one who's been very active defensively. I'm going to go with Arlington. I think Arlington wins this game. They're at home. I think Yonkers Brave is a little bit overmatched up front. Arlington's going to win this game, and I think they pull away pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Arlington, I feel like this is a big moment for them. I mean, obviously after the kind of the amount of power, the amount of talent they have this year, it's kind of like this is their year, right? This is kind of like that expectation that, last year they were competitive, but, they weren't the top dogs. They still had some struggles. And, I know a lot of people were saying Arlington's going to be the team to beat last year. And they still were very competitive, but they weren't the top team, right? And so now this was almost like I guess you could call it the revenge tour in a way, or their tour to kind of go out and say, hey, we are the top team this year. So this will be that kind of, I guess you say, crowning moment to say that they are the best team in the regular season, right? And if they can win this game, and they booked it already that they won the league, and now they're gonna go into the playoffs as the top seed. And I'm also going to go with Arlington at home. It's really tough not to really have the momentum on your side here. Obviously, Resigno's been playing very well, but like you said it before, there's a lot of guys on this squad that have been performing very well. It's not just one man band. It's a whole gang of guys that are going to show up and play. So I'm going to go with Arlington as well.
Yeah, and just to make clear, again, Arlington needs a win and Suffolk needs to lose for them to win the league title this week. Now, if Arlington wins the last 2 weeks, they win the league title. But I didn't see Tree Laz. He says they are doing AA then A. Yes, that's correct. So we're going through AA games, and then we'll do A. And again, don't worry about missing anything, guys. You can always go back and rewatch it, but I hope you stay with us the entire show. Let's go to the next game, Mars. John Jay East Fishkill 5-1 at Mamaroneck, who's 3-2. This one's a very interesting game to me out of the AA. When you look at John Jay, let's start with them. Offensively, they have 5 games where they have scored 30-plus points, and it starts with their quarterback in Feliciano, who's got a 12 touchdowns to 1 INT. He's been very impressive. He also has 6 rushing touchdowns to give him 18 total. The last 2 games, though, they've really started to run the ball, and it hasn't all been on Feliciano. Rossi has had over 100 yards the last 2 weeks, which I do think has been very important. Everything can't run through Feliciano, right? They need other guys to make plays for this offense for John Jay. Defensively, they forced a bunch of turnovers last week, 3 of them. They scored on an INT by Feliciano, who plays both ways. But Crouch is another guy who's very active on this defense, had 32 tackles and 1 sack so far. Rossi, Caliani, Berg. They have multiple guys who, again, I know they had a rough game a few weeks ago, and not really rough against Carmel, but they rebounded relatively well. They made a bunch of plays last week. Going up against Mamaroneck, who offensively in the rain and the ugliness, they struggled, right? They only had 84 yards against Carmel last week. They got to get back to running the football, using multiple guys in their quarterback, and then taking some shots to guys like Smeal. Defensively, I thought they battled. They've allowed less than 20 points in 3 straight games. They did give up a lot of running yards last week, so it's up to this defensive line and linebacking crew, guys like TJ Smith, Barry Thowes, who had the blocked field goal for a touchdown. They're going to have to slow down the run that John Jay Fishkill has been establishing these last couple of weeks. When I make this pick, again, John Jay Fishkill is on the road. Mamaroneck's at home. I really like the fighting grit of Mamaroneck, but I'm going to go with John Jay. I really like the way they're playing on both sides of the ball these last couple of weeks and establishing the run that Mamaroneck did struggle at times to slow down versus Carmel. Now, I don't think John Jay Fishkill has the size of Carmel, but I do think they will run the ball enough that will open things up in the passing game. And I'm not sure if Marinek's offense can keep up. I'm going to go with John Jay.
I'm actually going to go with Marinek. I think that they actually are going to have a kind of a big game to kind of define the way that they want the rest of the season going. I feel like playing at home definitely gives them a little bit more of a momentum on their side. But the fact that they played Carmel as tough as they did kind of tells me that they have the size to compete against a very well coached and well talented offensive line that Carmel had. So the question is going to be, can they do the same performance against John Jay's Fishkill? And I feel as if they're going to have a very close game. I think it could be a coin flip to the level of how close this game is going to be, but I'm going to go with Marinek. I mean, listen, I'm going to go the upset here, but Marinek's going to win.
Interesting. Let's go to the next game. Ours AA Mount Vernon 2-3 at Ossining, who's 2-4. And when I look at Mount Vernon, they scored 32 points last week. They have good size to them. They have the speed who could hit home run plays. And I'm going up against Ossining, who Ossining was dominant last week, Mars. They had that shutout. LaFaro, 225 yards rushing. Gio Jean-Pierre added another 96. When Ossining can establish the line of scrimmage, they can run the ball very efficiently. And I like the way their defense played against a Yonkers Forest team that was very explosive before that game. So looking at these two teams, can Ossining overcome the size of Mount Vernon? I think they do. I'm going to go with Ossining at home. I think they win this game. It is non-league, but an important game to get another victory under your belt. I think Ossining is going to establish a run. They got to run off tackle. Sometimes Mount Vernon has struggled to defend the outside run. Look for Ossining to take advantage of that in their wing T style. I'm going Ossining.
Yeah, you know what? I'm also going to go with Ossining. I feel as if they might be undersized against Mount Vernon, but the fact that they're extremely aggressive on the defensive front and their offensive front has been impressing me as day by day. It's really going to be dependent on who shows up. And I think that Ossining at home is going to give them enough of an advantage. I'm going to go with Ossining. I feel like I've been picking all the home teams so far today, but home games. Yeah, I picked every home game.
It's only three so far. It's only three so far, but let's go to the next one, Mars. And this is AA. See a couple of my comments. I love the comments, by the way. Let us know, guys, who you would think is going to win. Got one giving a shout out to Fox Lane, another giving a shout out to Rhineck, who's going to win out. We'll get to those games, guys. Don't worry. Next one, I want to talk about Carmel, 4-1 at Yonkers Forest, who's 3-3. And let me just start with Carmel, right? A win here wins the league title because they have the tiebreaker off. They already have a 2-game lead off of North Rockland, right, who lost to East Fishkill and Ossining. And they will have the tiebreaker over John Jay East Fishkill. So a win here on the road on a Friday afternoon, I think wins the league title if my math is correct. And I just want to state it by this. They have one of the more interesting stories to me. You know, their head coach, Tom Donahoe, who was volunteering during the summer, right, before he became the head coach of Carmel due to the medical reasons for Todd Kay. He was unceremoniously kind of let go as a freshman coach over a load of BS, which is its own story. But he comes and volunteers over at Carmel to be a position coach pretty much, right? Because Carmel wasn't going to have coordinators. They'd have position coach because Todd Kay likes to call the entire thing. Now he leaves, and now Donahoe's got to step in as head coach, and he kept this boat afloat. And so I don't know how. I think him and the coaching staff over there deserve a lot of credit. The kids also deserve a boatload of credit. And another shout out I want to give to is to their O-line coach. Carmel Mars has rushed over 600 yards the last 2 weeks. 600 yards. I mean, those are Madden numbers. You plug in your controller and you put on Madden and you play on rookie. And that's the kind of numbers that you can put up in a video game. They're doing that out on the football field. And it's because a lot of credit to this offensive line who is big and strong. And they have one of the best offensive line coaches in this section in Jeff Hughes, who deserves a shout out. And it's a bunch of guys. I mean, Werlew, he was tremendous. He runs the ball. He is strong, hits the hole really hard. They have Venables who runs it, Nunez who runs it. Multiple guys can run behind this offensive line. And they had to replace a couple of studs on that offensive line. And defensively, listen, they don't do a lot of complicated things. They're big, they're strong. They say, okay, we're going to stop the run. If you try to run in between the tackles, we don't think you could push us around. And then when they generate a negative play, now you're starting to see those pressures from the outside. right? They bring the pressure from the outside. They'll occasionally bring it up the middle. And guys like Risley, Santiago, Forrester, these guys, Abel, there's a bunch of guys that are making plays for this defense. They put you behind the chains, and then they bring the pressure, and they're daring teams to try to out-scheme these pressures and to get rid of the ball quickly, and teams have not been able to do it over these last few weeks. So I just wanted to say Carmel has been extremely impressive. They play good complementary football, running the ball, controlling the clock, and playing strong defense against the run. I do get nervous at times against the pass, and now against Yonkers Forest, they're playing against a team that is coming off a bad loss last week, but they can sling the rock, and they have some receivers who can make plays in space. So Yonkers Forest, going to Yonkers Forest on a Friday afternoon is a tough travel. That's not an easy one, right? So when I look at Yonkers Forest now, moving over to them, I mean, they got shut out last week. It was probably one of the more surprising losses that I saw from the teams last week, and Coach didn't mince words. I mean, he was on social media and he said they were outplayed and outcoached. You know, those are strong words, and I know that they take that to heart. I'm expecting to see Yonkers Forest come back with a lot more aggression in this game, and they're going to have to throw the ball, in my opinion, because it is very difficult to run against the size of Carmel. So to me, running the ball, especially in between the tackles, is going to be tough. They're going to mix with outside runs and throwing the ball to guys like Aquino. You know about guys like Henry. Testamark is another guy I saw make some plays in the slot. This offense is going to have to make some big plays in the passing game, Mars, if they're going to try to pull the upset. Defensively, they gave up over 300 yards rushing last week. That versus a Carmel offense that has run the ball at will does make me very nervous. I don't think they could pull the upset. I'm going to go with Carmel, Mars.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. I feel like this offense and defensive front for Carmel has just been dominant. They've owned the trenches, and you got to give a lot of credit to the offensive line and as well as Jeff Hughes for really getting these guys ready to go, and especially with the amount of really adversity that this team has faced already this season, and they're still the top dogs right now. And I feel like you have to give a lot of credit to that coaching staff and the guys. They really stepped it up. Those leaders really did get those guys going. And I really got to say, Carmel has just really been really dominating the rush offense so much that it feels as if they had, like you said, own the time possession, just kind of pound you, and then kind of can hit you with those passes because they have a lot of skill guys that are around that can make some big plays. But defensively, they've been doing well. Their front has been owning up really the trenches, and it's really been hard for teams to really compete. And I feel like when you're looking at Yonkers Forest, I think from their point of view, they're gonna have definitely a better a fight this match. I mean, in this game because of the fact that they had a struggle. And I feel like when you're playing at home and the playoff are on the line and you need to win these games, it's gonna be a fight. But in the end, I think Carmel's gonna win. I think this is going to be that moment that they kind of feel like they not say redeemed, but they feel as if we had a tough start, but we pulled together as a team and we secured those wins. And I feel like this is gonna be that good moment for that coaching staff and that team.
Just had a question. Chris Pond doing Class B. Yes, we're doing a double A right now. We'll get to A and then to B. Don't go anywhere. Anything missed, obviously, you can go back and watch. But, yeah, we're picking the games right now, and we're trucking along. Let's pick the next one, Mars, which is double A Suffern, who's 4-1 at Scarsdale, who's 3-2. And I thought Suffern had a nice bounce-back win last week. And it starts with their quarterback spot. That they struggled to pass the ball the week prior. Palumbo came back last week, 2 passing touchdowns. Now, Jeff Joseph, he has another 100-yard game this past week with 2 touchdowns as well. Snell is another guy at over 130 total yards last week. So they have a nice combination as long as they don't turn the ball over. The guys up front played a much better game last week. Look for them to do it against a scrappy Scarsdale team, but not a big Scarsdale team, right? So they're scrappy, they can move, they're not huge. So I'm looking to see the Suffern if they can dominate in the trenches up front. Defensively, Mars, this is probably one of the best defenses in the class, without question. They are up on my list. The defense has 7. They've allowed 7 or less points 4 out of the last 5 games, and less than 20 points in each game they played this year. So this is a very good defensive unit. Now, how do they defend against the option is going to be another thing. A play action pass is another thing that Scarsdale has made some really nice plays on this year. So interested to see that. When you go to Scarsdale, we know about guys like Knopp, who's a big playmaker for them on the offensive side, and Gilligan. It all starts with them. And then the quarterback, protecting the football. So I've seen multiple quarterbacks in Ebner, Boris, and Rosen playing the quarterback spot. They have to be very smart with the football. Don't turn the ball over. And the play action pass might open things up because Suffern likes to be very aggressive. So interested to see that. Defensively, they had 3 shutouts this year, Mars. So this is another defensive team that really does get after it. I think this is going to be a pretty low-scoring game to start off with. I am going to go with Suffern on the road, though. I love the way that they're playing defensively, even though I do like the way Scarsdale's playing defensively as well. But the size and physicality of Suffern, I think, wins out. I think Suffern wins this game.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to go the same way. I feel like Suffern's going to win mainly because their defense. I mean, both defenses are great, but I feel as if Suffern has, I think, more of a balanced team. They have their offense can score. They can move the ball around. And I feel like as long as they play responsibility football against Scarsdale, everyone does their, does their role, does their discipline, then I think they're going to be fine. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Suffern's going to win here.
Yeah, and I see and I appreciate you guys as always. Make sure you come in. If you have questions, shoot them in the chat. If the question is going to be about who do you have in this game, we'll pick them when we get to them. But what do you think about Ardsley's hype video? I loved it. I commented on it. I thought it was pretty fire. Whoever made it did a good job. Now, I do give a little brownie points for using my clips in it, but that's here or there. But I thought it was nice. What is your record compared to Lohud? That's a great question. I got to do the numbers, but I focus in on beating Mars first. So that's always a highlight of my day, is to beat him. But compared to Lohud, they actually have, I think, 2 people now doing records. So I got to go back and check. But I always try to beat a percentage, which was, I think, 80%. I think I'm well over 80%, but I'm always trying to be the best I can. And I got to check those numbers, so I don't have it exactly off the top of my head. I apologize. But let's keep going, Mars, unless you have anything. Did you see the Ardsley hype video?
No, I did not get to watch the Ardsley hype video.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job. Similar to Rye. I saw Rye do one before. But it was a nice video. Whoever did it on the RZ. Instagram.
Yeah, you know what? I gotta say, sometimes what they do is they have kids make the hype videos. Sometimes they have like a paid kind of videographer that does it. I mean, there's some really talented people out there that can make these on a weekly basis, and they have very good, high quality videos. So you gotta give a lot of credit to those people that do those.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the next one, guys. White Plains 0-5 at North Rockland was 4-2. This is a league game. When I look at White Plains last week, Mars, I honestly thought the defense played solid. I mean, offensively has kind of been the big question mark. They've had 3 games this year where they've scored 6 or less points. So the big question, I thought, at times the defense looks good, at times the offense looks good. They just can't get it going together at one point. And when I look at North Rockland, Mars, what have I said about North Rockland these last couple of videos that have, again, been a big kind of Achilles heel injury to North Rockland, and that's turnovers. And offensively last week, another 3 turnovers. They have had 12 turnovers this season. And so you look at that, and 9 of them are in their 2 losses. So think about that for a second. I rest my case, Your Honor, on the turnovers that have killed North Rockland in their couple losses. And, we know they like to run the ball, and I think that's got to be an emphasis. But when they get down, they have to start passing more than they probably want to. And running the ball with guys like Savor, who has over 500 yards so far this season and 10 touchdowns. Vasquez, who has, I think, about 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. So they have a dynamic duo. And then they could throw over the top with guys like Hamilton Farrar, who has over 400 yards receiving. So, they have some big playmakers, but they want to be ahead of the chains, and it starts with running the ball. But they got to protect the ball better. They have also, it's not just INTs, they have 7 fumbles, right? So it's a real tough thing where this offense shows such explosiveness, but they're shooting themselves in the foot. Defensively, you got to stop the run against White Plains and allow your defensive line and linebackers to, again, dominate in the trenches, and maybe your secondary against an inexperienced quarterback can force some turnovers. Mars, they have forced, I mentioned they have 12 turnovers. They have forced 13 turnovers. So this defense has done a very good job of forcing those turnovers, Mars. And with that, at home, I think North Rockland rebounds. I'm going with North Rockland.
Yeah, I feel like my answer is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be North Rockland, mainly because if they can limit turnovers, then I think they're going to win the game. They have all the skill guys. They have the size that can win matchups. It's really just, can you stop giving the other team the ball and at least give your offense some breathing, just give your momentum some breathing room, get some drives, score some points, and you'll get there. I'm going to go with North Rockland as well.
The final AA game, and then we'll go to A, guys, is RCK, who's 1-4, at New Rochelle, who's 2-4. And when I look at RCK, James Eglet, he's been running hard these last couple of weeks. I hope I said his name right. I apologize if I don't. And this offensive line has done a pretty solid job. Now, defensively, they had a fumble recovery last week. They had a couple sacks, but the offense just couldn't get going as well as they wanted to. Now, you go against New Rochelle, who's at times struggled off a play-action pass. So if you want to, again, if you can hold up front and run the ball a little bit, the play-action pass can open up. So I'm interested to see how they attack New Rochelle then. And you got to prevent the big play if you're going up against New Rochelle because of their speed. And when I look at Neuro, you definitely know this offense wants to attack off tackle, wants to use their outside runs and their speed. The quarterback runs with James have been, I thought, making some nice progress I saw last week. And they also have big playmakers like Dawson, who has a kick return touchdown or who can make plays at the wide receiver spot. Defensively, got to stop the run. This front seven needs to be dominant in this game. The secondary needs to be disciplined and not jumping routes. Be careful of the play action pass. New Rochelle is at home. I think New Rochelle wins this game. This is a very important game for New Rochelle to get some momentum going. I'm going Neuro.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest problem that the RCK is going to have is limiting New Rochelle getting to the outside. I mean, that was going to be kind of the really main focus for RCK to kind of keep this close. And I think New Rochelle is going to have the advantage because they're at home, but I feel like they're going to be able to break that contain, get their athletes on the outside, and make some big plays. I think New Rochelle is going to step it up. They need some momentum, like you said. I'm going to go New Rochelle as well.
All right, guys, that was AA. We're now going to go to A, but I do see Josh asked, have you seen the Fox Lane Homecoming High video? I have not, so send that to me. Maybe I can check it on IG, but I'll definitely go check it out. So I did not see theirs, but there's been some really good ones. Unfortunately, I've been so busy, I haven't been able to be on it too long, so definitely send them to me. Let's go into A, Mars. First one up, Yorktown 6-0 at Brewster, who's 2-3. Big league game. And when I look at Yorktown, offensively, last week wasn't their best game. And again, I mentioned this with Yorktown a few times. The reason why I really like Yorktown, they find different ways to win. Sometimes the offense is the reason. Sometimes the defense is the reason. Sometimes it's both, right? So, but offensively, I didn't think it was their best game, but they have been very explosive this year. 40-plus points, 4 out of 6 games. And they have multiple weapons. Their quarterback, Gonzalez. Their wide receiver, Costello's made some big plays. Price has been there. You have the running game with Del Vecchio and Constantine. This offensive line with Wilson and some of the other guys, big, strong, can move people. This is an offense that can beat you multiple ways. Now, what hurts them at times is penalties and turnovers. So you got to make sure that they are disciplined in that aspect. Defensively, Mars, they have been improving. 7 points total the last 3 weeks. They have been really dominating on the defensive side of the ball, forcing turnovers, creating negative plays, and it's multiple guys again. It's not just on the offensive side, it's multiple guys, but defense. Bogle is probably up there with defensive player of the year. He's had such a strong year at the linebacker spot. You have Weissman, Galante, who had a pick six. You have Cicinelli, who had a big play last week. So it's multiple guys making plays. They're an aggressive style defense. And now you're going up against Brewster on the road. Now they were down 21-0 in the first quarter against Somers last week, really quickly. And it was a bit surprising. Offensively, we talked about it a few times. They want to be ahead of the chains. They got to run the football, again, with guys like Fox, Barry, Lamaro. And this offensive line definitely needs to step up against some of these pressures versus Yorktown. But they want to run the ball, control the game, shorten possessions, shorten the other team having possessions, shorten the game as a whole, and maybe take some shots passing the ball. But when you get down that much, they start throwing more than they probably want to. And what unfortunately bothered me is defensively. I think this is a very strong defensive unit. At times, last week, I thought they got pushed around a little bit, especially throwing the football. It was just a little too easy for Somers. And so I'm looking for this defense to respond. Guys like Accurso, Bruce, Perello, Lamaro, Carlson. They have a good defensive unit overall. Now, I look to see against another explosive offense, but this time at home, they'll play a little bit better. With that said, I still think Yorktown wins. I think this will be not a 21-0 first quarter game. I think it'll be closer. Yorktown will pull away in the end. I'm going Yorktown.
Yeah, I feel like the big thing that when I look at Brewster's problem that they have is that they need to have a consistent offensive line play in order to be able to move teams and then really push people around and get their offense going. Because I feel like the way that this offense is built around is them controlling the clock, getting a more positive yards in the beginning, so that they can start kind of being more in that condensed formations, like that I guess that Eagles
some muddle huddle stuff.
Yeah, muddle huddle, push and shove,
tight end action, running the ball. They want to run the ball. That's the big thing.
And I think that's the kind of the big thing that Brewster needs to really set down in order for them to be successful. But Yorktown, I feel like, has that defensive front that has been impressive, very aggressive. They can really shut down anyone running the ball. And I feel like because of that, Yorktown, I feel like, is going to win the game because offensively, they've been very impressive all year. And I feel like defense has really been giving their guys a lot of opportunities. And I feel like the same thing is going to happen. I'm going to go with Yorktown.
Let's go to the next one, Mars. Mayapack 4-2 at Fox Lane, who's 2-3. And let's start with Mayapack. Offensively last week, it was the Koch show. He had 30 carries last week, including a couple receptions, 170 yards on the ground with a rushing touchdown, 65 yards receiving and a touchdown. And we know, we've talked about it in multiple weeks, and really anyone with eyes can see that Koch is their primary playmaker on the offensive side of the ball, followed up by some of those skill guys. And the big one is Carney, right, who had the wide receiver spot. But last week, what I liked is when they were trying to take away Carney, now Koch started to get going, and they relied on him to make plays and even open up things for a guy like Maskell, who had a receiving touchdown. So, again, that's what the offense is at this point. We know that to be true. They're going up on the road. They're going to have, I think, a size advantage. And I think running the ball and then taking shots with Carney is their formula. And I think that's going to be a continuous formula, even against Fox Lane. Defensively, Mars, they are really a bend and don't break defense, or what should I say, bend and force a turnover defense, right? So they have forced turnovers in every game this season. So this is a defense that turns the ball over and gives their offense extra possessions. And so that's going to be kind of their formula. Force some turnovers. You might give up some yards, try to attack the football, force turnovers, give the ball to Koch, and take some shots with Carney. That is the formula that I see when I've been watching these games. And I'm expecting that to continue. And on the defensive side, we see multiple guys make plays. We know about Koch. We know about Carney. But guys like Ryan, Varley, Maskell, they have a defense that multiple guys have shined at moments in this game. And their kicker, Pinto Mars, he is a game changer for them, special teams-wise. He really puts teams in a bad position when they're kicking. So they have a special teams boost on their side. But when I look at Fox Lane, overall, the reason why I love football is, and many people not know, like you read all the articles, you watch the game, you see exactly what's going on. And what I like about Fox Lane, his coach, is he does not mince words. And he said last week, they played Yorktown, they got shut out by Yorktown. And he said, that the team is not good enough yet to win these big games. And that sometimes, they're getting a lot of semi-moral victories. But what I love is he said, yet. You can't win these games, big games, yet. And I agree with him on two aspects. Number one, he also said the playoffs are in sight. And they are. If Fox Lane wins these last two games, they get in. It's really that simple. So you can only do it one game at a time. And you're at home. You're an underdog. Most people are expecting you to lose. The way to win big games, Mars, is to practice hard during the week and execute on game day. It's that simple. You can't win big games until you start winning big games. And that's just executing. And there's going to be bad things that happen throughout a football game. As you know, Mars, we both played, we both coached. But you know what you can control when a team's bigger than you? You can out-hustle them. You can out-grind them, right? You can do things that you can't see on paper, right? And that's just swarming to the football, executing, protecting the football. And that's what Fox Lane has to get to, right? Offensively, they have driven the ball multiple times and they have come up short, whether it is turnovers, whether it's not executing on third and fourth down. So they have the opportunity. They got to take some shots passing the ball. They got to be able to run the ball. And defensively, I'm looking at some of these seniors like Bailey, Minotti. They got to be studs. If they want to be the best and beat these bigger teams that they're underdogs to, these are the guys that have to be studs and send the message all the way down their roster. With all that said, I'm going to pick Mayapack because for Fox Lane, for me, I need to see it to believe it. And I do think they have some talented kids, but Mayapack has been more consistent. They're bigger. They're favored. They should be favored. And they have the playmakers in Koch, who I do think eventually is going to win the game for them. I'm going to go with Mayapack.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest thing that Fox Lane really needs to focus on for this game is kind of disrupting the momentum or the smoothness of what Mayapack is used to, right? That dynamic duo between Koch and Carney has been working well for them. especially when their offense does move and does score. Defensively, like you said, they're the bend but don't break. But I feel like Fox Lane, kind of in order for them to keep this game close or to possibly win, is they have to disrupt that combination. Meaning that you either have to stop Koch from taking over the game and forcing throws, that making Carney have to be the only one to beat you, and making it being a throwing fest, right, to make it a close matchup. Or how about don't make mistakes on special teams, because every single team that we see play Mahopac makes a mistake on special teams, and Mahopac special teams unit has been performing well and they've been consistent. So when it comes to what Fox Lane can do, don't make mistakes, break the smoothness of this duo that we see in Mahopac, and you might make this a close game, especially home field advantage, playoffs in sight. You got to see it, but I don't see it. I think Mahopac's going to win. I think
that's a tough line at the end.
I know. I just don't see it yet. I feel like that's the thing. I feel like they have heart, but you got to execute, right? I think that's going to be the goal, right? I think Mahopac has been, especially special teams, has been doing really well. They've been always getting the, I guess, field of position advantage almost every single time. And when you have Koch that can just run the ball and just get yards even after contact, and then Carney has been kind of just playing very well all season, I feel like you just have an advantage up front too with the size. So I feel like Mahopac's going to win this game here. But Fox Lane, you can take my words, put it on your locker room. At the end of the day, this is your moment. If you want to make the playoffs, like your coach said, you got to win both games.
Yeah, and it all starts with one game at a time, right? You can't look the next week. You have to win the game in front of you. But let's go to the next one, and it's the team why I'm wearing this hat, and that's Harrison 4-2 at Forrest Greeley, who's 2-4, and this is a league matchup. And I mentioned this before on a previous show. If I have a team of the week and I have their merchandise towel rocket, Harrison was our team of the week, Mars, with their big win versus Eastchester last week. So that's why I'm rocking the hat. I don't have all the gear, so I'll give shout outs if it's one if I don't have their gear, but I do have Harrison, so I am rocking it in this one. But let's start Harrison. Offensively, listen, they are doing just enough offensively to win games. Their quarterback, Citro, he was 7 of 13 for 129 yards and a touchdown. But this offense does have to get more explosive and more consistent. Their running game, it all starts with their running game and guys like Barcella and Krupe. But look for them. I'm interested to see if they can get guys like Lanza more opportunities. And even McLaughlin, who's a receiver, really fast. But sometimes it's hard to throw the ball consistently if he's going to be out as the wide receiver. Maybe move him into the slot at times. Maybe put him in some wildcat situations. They got to get more dynamic offensively because this offensive line is big. They can push people. I think that's what's going to be the best bet. They're going to run the ball against Greeley, but they do have to show some more consistency overall offensively. Defensively, this is a very good unit. This is probably one of the best defenses in the class, Mars. They've had 2 shutouts in the last 3 weeks. They have allowed 14 or less points 4 out of the 6 games. It all starts up front with this defensive line and linebacking core who can really get after you. And I think that's what it's going to be because Greeley at times has turned the ball over quite a bit. And if they can get them behind the chains, if they can keep Osh in the pocket, now the secondary can make some plays we've seen at times forcing turnovers because they have the speed to do it. So look for Harrison to run the ball, pressure the quarterback, and potentially force some turnovers. And when I look at Greeley offensively, we know this team has weapons, right? But turnovers have been an Achilles heel, like I mentioned previously. We know we have Osh, Blakesley. They have some running backs who can make plays for you, but they got to protect the football. They had 2 turnovers last week. And how this offensive line handles the size of Harrison is going to be huge. Defensively, they have struggled against the run last week, Mars. They gave up 4 rushing touchdowns, so you got to be better against Harrison because Harrison's going to run the football with multiple guys. So with all that in mind, I know Greeley is at home, but I am going to go with Harrison to win this game. I believe if they win this game, it also clinches the league title for them because they have the tiebreaker over Eastchester and Clarkstown South. So a win here, I think, clinches it for them. So I'm going to go with Harrison and also winning the league title.
Yeah, I think this is actually going to be a very interesting matchup because Greeley is going to want to test whether Harrison's defense can compete, especially in the secondary. I mean, because they're going to try to throw it all over, whether it's going to be short passes, long passes. But Harrison's defense and secondary has to really step up. They have to really kind of limit any sort of big plays, and they have to try to get some sort of turnover to really get their guys the ball back in their hands so they can try to control the time of possession. Because I feel like Harrison's going to try to run this clock out and just own up front, because they have some big boys. They have some aggressive guys that can push people out of the way. And really, their job is going to have to be to limit the run, limit the damage, right? Try to get them behind the line, try to get them in a longer scenario, to have them put them in a situation that they want to be in. And with that being the case, I still think Harrison will win this game. Momentum's on their side. Their defense has been phenomenal this whole season. And now it's going to be whether or not they can capitalize and really end this this regular season on a very good note. Secure this win, and they almost will secure number 1 on that division.
Let's go to the next one. Clarkstown North 1-4 at Pelham, who's 0-5. And Clarkstown North's offense really woke up last week, Mars, and that was with running the football. 4 players scored a touchdown last week. Callipy had 2 rushing touchdowns. Aiden Pompey had a touchdown. Biggio had a touchdown. Kavanaugh made some plays on the receiving end. But I really like the physicality this offensive line played with, helping dominate up front. On the defensive side, they forced turnovers, which gave their offense more opportunities. Barry had 2 INTs. So Clarkstown North going on the road, got to bring that physicality with them, because when I look at Pelham, they're going to have to match that physicality. If Clarkstown North can run the football the way they did last week, it's going to be a long day for Pelham. But I will say this, they are at home. They want to get that first victory. I'm going to go with Pelham. I actually think they're going to pull off the upset here. Clarkstown North is riding high, but have to go on the road. I think Pelham matches the physicality up front. I think they make just enough plays on offense, even though their offense has struggled at times. I think Pelham wins in a very close game at home.
Yeah, see, these games are going to be definitely a coin flip to see who wins, because I feel like it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think. I do agree with you that this is going to be a fight, and Pelham's going to really, being at home, they're going to really push to try to get that dub and their home field. But I feel like Clarkstown North is starting to show us what they can do. They have offense has definitely stepped up big time. I think they're going to win the trench warfare, and I think their O-line is going to push the people around. I'm going Clarkstown North.
Next one up, we have Clarkstown South, who's 2-3 at Eastchester, who's 4-2. Huge implications on this game as well. Let's talk about Clarkstown South. I know last week I was a little bit harsh on them because of the on the offense that lacked a lot of efficiency in the turnovers. They struggled to finish drives, which has been a killer for this, because I think the defense has played very well these last few weeks. But tell you what, last week offense exploded, 51 points, Mars, and they were efficient. And that's the big thing that I'm emphasizing. They showed that last week that they can do it. Quarterback Holder was 9 of 11, 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. We know about Butler, who had about 112 total yards and 2 touchdowns, and also making impact on defense. Oliveri had 100 total yards and a couple touchdowns. Tito's a guy we've seen now show up the last couple weeks. He had a receiving touchdown and a pick. This offense has playmakers, but they have to be smart with the football and execute and get what we call ugly yards and finish drives. Last week they did. Now they got to go on the road against a very tough defense and do that again. And so it's going to be really important. I do think Clarkstown South is going to test the secondary of Eastchester. I don't think running the ball is going to be that too easy against them. So they're going to try to throw it, and they have to be smart and not turn the ball over. Defensively, they've only allowed, I think, 3 offensive touchdowns the last 3 games. This defense has played very well. And now Eastchester, if they can keep their quarterback in the pocket and stop the run, I think they can be in good shape for this game. So interested to see how Clarkstown South plays it, but the real important thing is to keep Schultz in the pocket. Now I want to look at Eastchester. Last week they were in a tight fist fight with Harrison. The offense struggled, right? And they couldn't finish drives. So I look at this offensive line that definitely needs to step up again, and their quarterback in Schultz has got to use his arm and his legs in this one. And I do think they'll have a better time running the ball, especially on the outside. They got to run towards the outside. It's going to be difficult, like even against South, to run up the gut. So we're going to see how that offense plays. But defensively, Mars, this is, again, one of the better units in Class A. They showed up last week against Harrison besides 1 touchdown, 7 or less points in 5 out of the 6 games. Multiple playmakers, guys like Tito, Shiafone, Mannion. These are guys that can swarm to the football, defend the run. But in this game, they're going to have to tackle in space. Clarkstown South likes to grab the ball, throw these quick bubbles around, take some play action shots down the field, and you've got to tackle in space. Interested to see in this game. This one was a hard one. Clarkstown South overall is 2-0 versus Eastchester, and they won by an average of 20 points. But I think Eastchester wins, Mars, at home. I think they're going to pull this upset. I mean, record-wise, it doesn't look like Eastchester's the underdog. but Clarkstown South's a bigger team. But I do think Eastchester defensively is going to make enough plays, force a couple turnovers against South. I think they win this game, Mars. I'm going with Eastchester.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be one of the most interesting games. And if I'm not going to say this is not it's actually going to be one of my closest points of being game of the week because of the fact that this is major playoff implications. It sets the tone for the rest of the season heading into the playoffs. And Eastchester and Clarkstown South are both very viable contenders. On their best days, they can beat nearly anybody, right? But it really depends on who steps up. And it's going to be really, I think, the defensive showcase, right? I think Eastchester needs to kind of show up and be the defense that they've been all year. They've been considered one of the best defenses in all A. And I feel like when you have a very explosive offense in what we see with South versus Eastchester, one of the best defenses, I'm going to go with the defense. And I think Eastchester is going to win with their secondary is going to be tested a lot. But I feel like they're tackling. Their guys up front are going to make some big plays. They're going to win that turnover differential. Eastchester will win this game at home and secure a solid 2 spot if they win the last game as well. But it's going to be one game at a time. I'm going to Eastchester.
Last A game, guys, and then we're going to head to B. And let's talk about Somers 5-1 at John Jay Cross River, who's 2-3. And let's start with Somers, right? And Mars, Somers is having a very, I would say, people will call it a quiet 5-1, right? And a lot of games that they have dominated. But Somers at times is what I like to call playing with your food, which they usually kind of get off the slow starts. They don't execute as well in the beginning, and then they rev it up, and then they just start pulling away from teams. That didn't happen last week, right? They went up 21-0 right out of the gate in the first quarter, and I thought that's an important thing for them to come out fast because it's a great feature to have resiliency, to rebound, to make adjustments, and play better as the game goes along. But you're always fearful as a coach that can you rev it up each time? So that's why you want to start off faster. And they did that last week. And I'm hoping to see that continue going forward. Obviously, it starts on offense with their quarterback in Sullivan Mars. He's completing 68% of his passes, has over 1,000 yards passing, 13 touchdowns to 6 INTs, and also another 6 touchdowns on the ground. So he's going to be probably up there for player of the year. He has played very tremendously. I think he's maybe 1 or 2 games out of these 6 that I thought he didn't have his best performance. But outside of that, he's been very efficient these last couple of weeks. His offensive line also has been moving people consistently. They have 4 runners with over 100 yards of total rushing yards this season. It's led by Kelly, who's got 488 and 6 touchdowns. And the wide receiver who's kind of been the spark plug for this offense is Palazzolo. He has over 600 yards receiving marks and 7 touchdowns. He's been a huge spark plug for them. They like to put him in the slot. John Jay Cross River has a solid secondary, but because Palazzolo's in the slot a lot, it's going to be interesting to see how the corners, how they play them secondary-wise. He puts a lot of pressure on your safety or your flat defender if you're going to try to play him on that slot. I don't think the Cross River can do that. Iglesias is another guy who's a very versatile guy. So when you bracket coverage towards Palazzolo, a guy like Iglesias is another guy who can make plays for you on the offensive side. Defensively, they've allowed 14 or less points in 5 straight, including having 2 shutouts. And this is another defense that does a really good job of stopping the run and forcing you to throw the ball, probably more than teams want to. But they do put a lot of pressure on their secondary to make plays. It's because this front 7 is a handful. Guys like Newman, Conti, Kreco, Cole, they can really get after you. And against this undersized Cross River offensive line, that's where they want to dominate. Now going to Cross River, I like how they were down early against Mahopac last week, Mars, but didn't give up. They kept battling. They made it a game. They made Mahopac sweat, but they didn't make enough plays. And when you're trying to pull off the upset, you got to execute on big plays. They had a wide-open touchdown drop. They had a 4th down where the wide receiver couldn't get his foot in bounds on another one that didn't end up being a touchdown. So if you pull up the upsets, you got to make those big plays. I thought Machado had some strong throws. We know about their wide receiver, Macrolisi. Defensively, these DBs are really going to have their hands full against these Somers wide receivers. I thought Arfige was tremendous last week against Kearney. Do they try to move him into the slot at times when Palazzolo is there? Interested to see how John Jay does it, but they like to bring those guys off the edge and bring some pressure because they are undersized. A guy like Russo has made a lot of plays. I think Somers is going to run the ball, Mars, and that's going to be the big thing, setting up this play action pass or some RPO action to the wide receivers, but running the ball and dominating against an undersized Cross River defensive front seven is probably going to be Somers' way to go. I think Somers does win. I don't think John Jay Cross River can pull off the upset at home. I'm going Somers.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm looking at this game, I do agree. I think Somers is going to win this game, mainly because I just feel like they have too many skill guys that John Jay does not have enough guys to match up with. I feel like, yes, you can limit certain players to not dominate the game, but Somers has proven to be one of those squads that has a collection of stars that can really make plays when you need them to. And if you limit one, it's hard to limit multiple. So I feel like they've been dominating up front, and they've just been running the ball down everyone's throats. And then when that happens, they get to play action, and then they start hitting big plays. And then once they get in that groove, they start to dominate. But like you said before, you don't want to see them lax too often in the beginning of the games, because what happens when you play a team that's going to be equal to your level? You lax too early, you might be down, and now you have to come back from behind versus being ahead. If you really come out firing early, I still think Somers is going to win. They'll go to John Jay Cross River at a away game, which is always difficult to go do at John Jay, and I think they're going to win here. I'm going to go with Somers.
All right, that was A, guys. Like always, appreciate you guys if you continue watching. If you're new, we just finished AA and A. Now we're going to go to B. If you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. If you have questions, make sure you guys throw it in the chat. And don't worry about missing anything, guys. We post this to our channel. You can always go back and rewatch to see all our picks. So appreciate you guys as always. But let's go and dive into B, Mars. And first one up is Irvington, who's 0-5 at Albertus Magnus, who's 1-4. When I look at Irvington, they can move the ball. We've seen them at times be explosive and score some points. Defensively, though, is where things get a little nerve-wracking. 40-plus points allowed in 4 out of 5 games. And now I know Albertus Magnus' offense at times has struggled. I think defensively, they've been pretty consistent. So if Albertus Magnus can limit the big plays by Irvington, I think this offense is going to get going. I'm going to go with Albertus Magnus to win at home in this one, Mars.
Yeah, this is a tough one, and I do agree with you. I feel like this is going to be relatively close. Albertus Magnus' defense needs to really step up and try to, like you said before, limit the big plays. And if they do, they can try to win that kind of small game, and their offense can methodically go down the field and get some points. It'll be a close game for me as well, but I'm going to go Albertus Magnus at home. I think they're going to win this game.
I do see a question from Brooke, which I appreciate you guys sending in as always. This is a Croton Harmon question against Putnam Valley. So I'll save your question, Brooke, for when we get to the game, and then I'll answer it for you. So don't worry about that. But let's continue, Mars. Next one up is Nanuet, who's 3-2 at Hen Hud, who's 1-4. And let me just say, sometimes I give harsh medicine, right? And it's all out of respect because I love this game, and I want to see, especially when teams that I have value highly, I feel did not execute, right? So Nanuet has to get a little bit of medicine this week, because last week I thought they had a real brutal game versus Pleasantville. And losing to Pleasantville is that's something that Pleasantville does to a lot. But what was kind of scary to me was defensively how easy Pleasantville moved the ball on them. So I know it happened one time before against Rye. The following week, the defense really stepped up and got a shutout. So, they have 3 shutouts this year, and usually the week after they have a really tough game, the defense steps up again. And I think that's what they're going to have to do this time. And it's stopping the run is going to be the big thing, especially against Hen Hud, who likes to run the football. Now, offensively, they're one of those teams that likes to stay ahead of the chains, right? They want to run the ball. They want to chew up clock. They want to beat you with physicality. And then the play action stuff comes out of it. But if they got to get into a passing fest, that's not what they're built for. So I'm expecting them to run the ball. I'm expecting them to play much better defense. When I look at Hen Hud, again, they had their first win last week, which was huge for them, and their new coach. And it was running the ball. They've been much more efficient. Andrade had 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. 4 different players scored last week. Parkes, he had over 112 yards total, and an INT. We know about Abowd, their quarterback, who's made some plays for this team. The only problem is, again, Hen Hud has some solid size. They can run the ball, but I think Nanuet is going to run the ball much more efficiently and defensively is why I'm going to go with Nanuet. I think they're going to rebound after a very poor performance last week. I think they come back with a vengeance. I think Hen Hud's going to have a difficulty moving the ball consistently. I'm going to go with Nanuet, Mars.
Yeah, I'm also gonna agree. I feel like Nanuet, they're like an enigma. Like they have those really stout defensive games, and then they have struggles, right? And I feel like they, like you said before, the momentum is now swinging back to kind of stabilizing themselves. But it really starts with their defense. If the defensive front can limit the big runs, then I think they're gonna get back into their rhythm. They're gonna slow down the game, play it the Nanuet way, overload sides, start running the ball to the outside, getting those play action passes. And I feel like that's going to, once they get back in that Nanuet rhythm, that's when they start to do really, really well. So I'm also going to go Nanuet here.
All right, let's go to the next one, which is Nyack 3-2 at Lakeland, who's 3-3. And to me, this is one of the more interesting matchups in B. And let's start with Nyack. Offensively, Mars, really running the ball very well. They rushed over 480 yards the last 2 weeks. And it's multiple guys who contribute to it. Claremont had 124 and a touchdown. Pierre had 156 last week and a touchdown. And then their quarterback in Tylen Williams, who hasn't thrown the ball a lot, but he's been efficient, 5 of 7 for 97 yards and a touchdown. This is an offense that really can pound the rock. This offensive line has improved. And as long as they can limit turnovers, I think this is an offense that could probably run the ball this week as well. Now, defensively, they've allowed 14 or less points 3 out of 5 games. And leading the charge is a guy like Booten, who had 10 tackles and an INT last week. Lakeland has, the last couple of weeks, Mars, started off slow and have turned the ball over. And a guy like Booten is a guy who attacks the football and can cause some turnovers. So I think Nyack's going to try to run the ball, control this game, and force some turnovers on the defensive side. When I look at Lakeland, listen, offensively, they lost last week to Ardsley. They outgained their opponent, but they start off so slow. Even the prior week against Pleasantville, they started off very slow. And then they have turnovers, which have killed them. They had 4 turnovers last week. I think it was, 2 or 3 the week before versus Pleasantville. Those are killers. And it starts with their quarterback in Leonard, who is a super talented guy. He's got to protect the football better. He's got to make better decisions and protect the football because he is a lightning rod for this offense. And one thing that Nyack has struggled at times is defending the run. So Castro had 70 yards last week. I think he can get some opportunities. Lakeland has a good enough size to match up with Nyack. So I think they'll have some opportunities to run, and then that's when the play action and those deep shots to guys like Perry and Gallagher can really open things up. What's not talked about enough, Mars, the last 2 weeks, I think Lakeland's defense has played pretty well. Last week, they held Ardsley to 198 total yards. They got to stop the run. They have some size. These guys got to attack the football. This is another very evenly matched to me. But because Lakeland's at home, I'm going with Lakeland. I think Lakeland wins this game. Defensively, they have played well enough against some of the top echelon teams. But offensively, if they don't turn the ball over, I think they could pull away with some of these victories. And I think it starts in this game. I'm going to go with Lakeland.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting game to me as well. And I feel like it has a lot to do with, the consistency of both sides. I feel like they both have to have this, efficiency when it comes to the lack of turnovers, or, they have to be a lot more better just holding onto the ball and not stalling a drive. I feel like for Lakeland, they've been doing that way too often when they have a lot of offensive weapons that can get them moving, and they have some big guys up front. They have some skill players that can make some plays, but these turnovers have been just killing them. And I feel like if they can limit that, that does give them the advantage. And I'm also going to go with Lakeland here as well. I feel like they have the offensive weapons to dominate teams, but the turnovers have been killing them. Limit the turnovers, then there's a better chance of winning. I'm going Lakeland.
Let's go to the next B matchup. Sleepy Hollow 2-4 at Pleasantville, who's 5-0. Mars, we'll let you talk about the game. You won't pick it, but starting with Sleepy Hollow offensively, they have run the ball very well. And again, leading the charge and really the engine of this offense is Evan Bowen. He's had 369 yards rushing the last 2 weeks and 5 touchdowns. The size of this offensive line and running the ball consistently is going to be vital for Sleepy Hollow for 2 reasons. Number one, to keep Pleasantville's offense off the field, and number 2, to shorten the game. So those are going to be so important for Sleepy Hollow to run the ball effectively or somewhat effectively. The problem I have is defensively, 30-plus points allowed 3 out of the last 4 weeks. So that is a major concern. When I look at Pleasantville, they're playing at a high level on both sides of the football, and that's what makes it very deadly for the rest of the teams in B. We know about Daniel Picard Mars. He has over 600 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns, over 200 yards receiving and another 3 touchdowns, so 10 total touchdowns so far. But he hasn't been alone. This offensive line has started to really gel and open things up for some other guys. Aiden Picard, last week, I thought had his probably best performance. 13 of 17 passing and 212 yards and 3 touchdowns. versus a Nanuet defense that was pretty strong. So he was very efficient. Coleman has made some big plays. He's kind of their leading receiver so far with 3 touchdowns. Offensively, they're starting to gel and make plays outside of Daniel Picard. Obviously, Daniel Picard he dictates defenses, but these other guys are making plays. And as long as they don't turn the ball over, I think they can control things. Defensively, Mars, they have forced 9 turnovers this year. They have allowed 13 or less points in 4 out of 5 games. And this is multiple guys. Stopping the run is going to be big. So looking at Horrigan, Sadow, McPhee, and this defensive front to really dominate things. If Sleepy Hollow has to get to a passing game, the secondary now can start to make some plays. They've had 5 sacks. The 9 turnovers were on offense for Pleasantville. So that's the offense. Defensively, they have forced 12 turnovers, and they've had 5 sacks. So this is a defense that really does get after it. And if they can stop the run up front, this secondary, who has made some nice plays over the last couple weeks, I think they get an interception or 2. I'm going to go with Pleasantville, Mars, but talk about this game overall.
Yeah, I feel like when I look at this game, it's really going to be up to the Hogs that really can define how this game is going to go. I think for Pleasantville, the Hogs up front have been impressive. They've definitely been performing well each and every week. And, a lot of times, including us, it's not just us, but even Lohud will also say that, it's really up to the line up front to really move bodies. And a lot of people were kind of doubting Pleasantville's line really from the beginning. They said they're a relatively younger group. And when that's the case, it's hard to see whether they're going to perform, right? But they have been doing very well, and I've been impressed. And I feel like Sleepy Hollow, the biggest thing that they need to do is kind of develop that run, right? They need to kind of slow the game down, have it more for their sake. But I think from Pleasantville's defensive perspective, you got guys like Horrigan and Sadow who have been killing it all year. So it's really going to be, whose front is going to make this game theirs. And, I think it's going to be a battle of the Hogs. That's going to define this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Brooke, I'm going to get back to you. I didn't forget about you. Here's the game. Croton Harmon 2-3 at Putnam Valley, who's 3-2. And now I'll answer your question, Brooke. And the question we have is, how is Croton's O and D line going to match up versus Put Valley's? Not having a guy like Nussbaum is going to be difficult. Played very well against them defensively last year. Well, Nussbaum was a very good player. So it's not easy to replace them. Now, what I like about Croton Harmon up front is they have a scrappy group that is not undersized. They're not huge, but they're not undersized either. So I do like the way the defense has performed. Now, offensive line-wise, I think is going to be the biggest test because Putnam Valley has a very good defense of unit and defensive front. So I think that's where it's going to be the biggest issue matchup-wise for them. But this defensive line against, again, similar guys on the offensive line, I do think they can make some plays. And to give some stats, Croton Harmon, Mars, defensively, they've allowed 7 or less points in 3 out of 5 games. So this defense has made some plays. Last week, they forced 3 turnovers. So this defense has been pretty scrappy all year long. But the question is offensively. And now last week, they had a real big explosion. Jones was 7 of 8, had 2 touchdowns at 164 yards, also 72 yards rushing. Ben Reed had 2 touchdowns. Orlando Gomez had a receiving touchdown. But can they do that consistently is the question. When I look at Putnam Valley, this is a very good defensive unit. They've allowed 14 or less in 4 out of 5 games. Last week, I know they gave up 30 points, but they played very tough, and some of those were off of special teams. So to me, this defensive line in Jashaj, Caden Glenn's made plays, Dobra's made plays. They have multiple guys at each level who can really get after it. And if Croton Harmon doesn't stay ahead of the chains, they could be in trouble. Now, offensively, they like to run the ball with Meister. That's going to be the big thing, running the ball, controlling this game, and can this pass attack get some more consistency? That's where they have really struggled for Putnam Valley, the consistency in the passing game. This has not been an easy pick, but Putnam Valley at home with this defensive unit and this defensive front, I think is going to give Croton Harmon's offense some trouble. I'm going to go with Putnam Valley to win this one, Mars.
Yeah, I feel like this was a very close game in my eyes as well. I feel like the offensive defensive fronts of both teams are really what's going to define this game overall. But I feel like Put Valley's defense has been very impressive all year. So it's really going to be up to Croton Harmon's offensive line to really move some bodies around, to get some running space, to get some breathing room for this offense to move the ball around. And even with that being the case, I feel like Put Valley is going to win mainly because it's a home field advantage. Defense hasn't really shown really much weaknesses at this point. They've been very consistent. So I feel like unless I see something change, I think Putt Valley is going to win here.
Yeah. All right, I see. Baby J, did you do Pelham yet? We did do Pelham, man. You can go back and watch it, so don't. You can see all our picks afterwards. Don't leave us just yet, but we did do the Class A games. We are on Class B right now. Mars, my game of the week. Ardsley 5-0 at Rye, who's 4-2, and this is going to be a very interesting game for me. Because Ardsley is a team that has been very good all year long. Before the season, all the talk is Pleasantville and Rye, and then some of these A teams coming down, and Ardsley was kind of an afterthought. And they have showcased that they are a contender. They're 5-0 for the first time since 2018 and 2019. And they're a true contender in my eyes. And it's because they can make plays on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I also love that I saw, again, Ardsley, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, had a nice promo video for the game. And then Rye, they took, I guess, some clips from Rye's previous video. And Rye's social media commented and said, hey, you're not going to tag me in this? So not only are they battling on the football field, they're battling in the social media spaces, Mars. So obviously some real big kidding aside.
Now it's on.
Now it's personal. Yeah, now it's personal. But let's get back to actual things that matter, which is on the football field. And Ardsley offensively, they didn't have a great game offensively last week. They only had 198 total yards, but they made just enough plays. And it's going to rely on this offensive line against the size and the aggressiveness of Rye's defense. They like to bring a lot of pressure, and how this offensive line handles that, the slanting, the blitzing, is going to be absolutely huge. Their quarterback, Rendy's had a tremendous season. They use him in throwing the football. They also use him, a big part of him is running the football. So establishing the run is going to be big. And they have a couple backs they like to hand it off to, like Silverman, Dulcine, Fiore. And their wide receiver is a big boy in Chenard. Look for Rye to pack the box to try to stop the run. And Chenard might have one-on-one opportunities. Rye at times will leave their DBs on an island because they want to bring that extra pressure to generate negative plays. So I'm interested to see that. Defensively, this has been a really good unit. They have allowed less than 10 points now the last 3 games. They do a really good job of forcing turnovers. They had 4 last week. Stopping the run is going to be so important for Ardsley, because if you can get them in second and third and long, that's when Rye at times has turned the ball over. But if the Rye can run the ball, that's where this offense really opens up. And when I look at Rye, Mars, they're slowly starting to get guys back. They've dealt with a lot of injuries and a lot of adversity throughout the year. And if they can limit the turnovers, they have had 8 turnovers so far this season. They can limit turnovers. I do think they can move the ball. This offensive line and the running game, they've had 437 yards rushing the last 2 weeks, which helps set up guys like A.J. Miller off of play action when they're ahead of the chains. Miller, he's completing 67% of his passes, but he has 7 INTs, right? So if he can limit those turnovers, he's been efficient. He makes big plays for this offense. Luliano is a guy who had 565 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns. His offensive line and run game has been really strong. And they have a couple skill guys. I know that Shepard Griffiths, we're not exactly sure. I'm not sure of his status, but Asa Yavadi, Stevens has made some play. Kesner was back last week, who's big for them on both sides of the football. Defensively, they do a really good job of forcing turnovers. 10 plus turnovers. 10 turnovers so far this year. They're led by guys like Gonzalez and Will Marath. That are really going to have to stop the run against Ardsley as well. I'm loving the matchup up front, Mars, between Rye and Ardsley on both sides of the line of scrimmage. With all this said, I think Ardsley is a true contender. Going on the road at Rye, I'm going to go with Rye. I think Rye wins at home. I think these teams are closer than people think. I think Ardsley is a good football team, a well-coached football team, but going on the road at the Garnets, at Rye Stadium, I don't know what they're rocking, whatever the crowd is. They might be a purple out or something, but if they're all rocking black, it's going to be ugly out there, and I think Rye wins a close game. I'm going Rye.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the game of the week, mainly because of the fact that both these teams are stout, right? They both have a lot of skilled guys, a lot of hogs up front that can make some big plays. And I agree with you. The matchup of the day is going to be how Ardsley's offensive front can match up against this highly blitzing defensive front that Rye will send. And the Rise defensive backs are going to be tested, but damn, it's going to be a showdown of the fronts, man. You know me. I'm a big fan of the Hogs up front battling out one-on-one. So it's going to be a test to see who's going to get that advantage. I feel like Rye is going to win this game, mainly because it's a home game. As you said, AJ Miller is a very dangerous player, but if he turns the ball over often, then he's not going to be the same guy. He's a very efficient thrower, but he needs to really step it up this time and limit the interceptions. If he's efficient, this game can really turn the tide, and it's all going to be up to the fronts that can really give him some time on both offense and on defense. They have to own up front. And I think Rye's going to win this game because the health is coming back on their side.
So Harrison Strassler says it's a blackout for Ardsley. So this is going to be a slugfest. I'm excited for it. Did we do Edgemont yet? Not yet, guys. We are getting there. And did we do Peekskill yet? No, not yet. Let's get to the next game, which is Ardsley has dogs on the line, and Speckman and Kaplan. Oh, I know they have dogs. I mean, me and Mars have both just said that's the fight right there, is the dogs up front. Speckman is a big-time player for them. Kaplan is another guy who's made some plays, and Rye's got, size. So, that's where this game is going to be won, is in that space. I know we all talk about all the skill guys, but that's where it's going to be won. Let's talk about Hastings, 1-4 at the Briarcliff Hamilton football program, was also 1-4. And this is an interesting game. Offensively, both teams have at times really struggled. And for Hastings, they've scored 7 or less points 2 out of the last 3 games. But the Briarcliff Hamilton football program has struggled to stop the run at times. They gave up a lot of yards last week. Can Hastings run the ball consistently is the big question I have. And when you look at the Briarcliff Hamilton football program, they've scored 13 or less in 3 straight. So both offenses trying to get to a groove. Defensively, they have only allowed 14 or less 3 out of the last 4 weeks. And because of that, I think defense wins out. I think Briarcliff Hamilton football program wins this game at home, Mars. I'm going with Briarcliff.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I think Briarcliff's defense has been impressive. Their offense has struggled, but they definitely have the advantage when it comes to just an overall aggressiveness and the ability to limit the big time plays. And I think Briarcliff's going to win this game, mainly because they're going to get their offense a lot more chances, and they're going to get some more points. I'm going Briarcliff.
Let's go to the next one. Byram Hills, 2-3 at Pearl River, who's 4-1. And Byram Hills, I know this is very strange, Mars. They're 0-3 at home and 2-0 on the road. And overall, they're 8-4 versus Pearl River. They have won 5 straight versus them. But the story for Byram Hills offensively is turnovers. I mean, they have a couple games where they've scored 28-plus games. I think it was 2 of them they scored 28-plus, and 3 games they've scored 14 or less. And if you look at those 2 games, the big thing you're going to see is the turnover differential, right? The offense at times has played way too many turnovers that have killed their offensive momentum. We know they have the skill guys in Accurso, Weiler, Burfield, at the wide receiver spot, Amachuchi, Marscott. But again, executing and hanging on to the football is something they have to do against this Pearl River on the road team. Defensively, they gave up, I think, 223 yards last week. They're going to have to stop the run. Pearl River, that is something that they have done a pretty good job at, is running the football. It's going to be huge for guys like Quint to make plays. For Pearl River, listen, I think they're playing pretty darn good football on both sides of the football, Mars. Offensively, they've scored 30-plus points in 4 out of the 5 games this year. They have multiple guys that have made plays for them in Whalen, McLaughlin, this rush attack against a Byram Hills defense that has struggled to stop them in Espinal. This offensive line has been a big question on can they continue to grow. They have done so far. Can they continue? That is the question. Defensively, they've also allowed 7 or less points in 4 out of 5 games. They had 2 blocked punts last week, so they're making plays in each phase of the game. Davin and Graziano were making plays for them last week. Listen, I know Byram Hills, they have won 5 straight versus Pearl River, Mars. I think Pearl River breaks it this year. They're going to win at home. They're playing very good football. I'm going with Pearl River.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to agree with you. I think Pearl River has been the most consistent team I've seen this year. I feel like they've had a very well-balanced team when it comes to both offense and defense. Defense has been stout. Offense has definitely been able to move the ball. And I got to give them a lot of credit here. I think that they're going to be able to break that streak. Pearl River at home, I think they're going to win.
Let's go to the last B matchup. Mars Edgemont, 1-3 at Rhinebeck, who's 5-1. And when I talk about Edgemont, let me just say this. They're not a big team, but boy, they are scrappy. And they like to run the football. They have multiple guys, and guys like Saito, Larson, and this defense really swarms, to the football. But they got to go on the road, and Ryeneck has won 5 straight. First time they've had 5 wins since 2019. The last time they've had 6 wins, Mars, 2014. So what a big opportunity for Ryeneck, especially playoff-wise. If Ryeneck wants to make the playoffs, they got to win this game. And we know that their quarterback in Merkel, he's been tremendous all season long. He had a touchdown pass. But it's not just him. I mean, there's other guys that have stepped up. And it's guys like Snow had a touchdown last week. Spicer had a touchdown last week. Salvaderi had a touchdown. This offensive line is opening up holes for this Ryeneck offense. We've seen Schneider make plays. But this is a very dangerous game to me. I think Edgemont is a very scrappy team. They can really get after you. With all that said, I am going to play with house money. I'm going to go with the hot team, Mars. I'm going with Ryeneck. They have won 5 straight. I think this offensive line will handle the physicality of Edgemont. Can they stop the run is the big question for me on the Ryeneck side. If this was at Edgemont, I was very leaning towards picking Edgemont. But because Ryeneck is at home, I think they win in a close one. I'm going Ryeneck.
Yeah, I feel like this game is going to be defined by the Ryeneck O-line, and I feel like that you got to give them a lot of props. They have been impressive. They have been moving bodies around, setting up their offense. They've really been driving down these fields, and Merkel has been impressive this entire season. So I feel like you definitely got to give Ryeneck that nod. I'm going to go with Ryeneck as well. They need to win to help get pushed closer to that playoff spot. This could be a momentous win for them if they can continue the streak. 6-0, that would be pretty big for them. So I'm going with Ryeneck. 6-1, yeah, 6-1. I'm going to go Ryeneck.
So Mr. Tree rolling with Mars. Well, I just picked Ryeneck too. So I don't. Where's whatever. Let's go to now C and D, guys. And this has been my favorite division because these teams have been so competitive with each other and battling it throughout the season. And this first one's a doozy. Haldane 4-1 at Valhalla, who's 3-2. And when I look at Haldane, they were up 20-6 last week and ended up losing. This offense, is a really strong one running the ball, but they've also made plays in the passing game. And Valhalla gave up a lot of big passing plays in the passing game these last couple weeks. But, Haldane really likes to emphasize the run. So I'm interested to see how Haldane attacks Valhalla. Look for quarterback Van Tassel, who's a dual threat guy, throwing the ball, running the ball. He can have a big game in this one. Giancinta has been tremendous all season long. He had 172 yards last week. We know about a guy, Murray, who's a big target for them in the passing game. So interested to see, but can this Haldane offensive line hold up against the physicality of Valhalla's defense? Defensively, they only allowed 198 yards last week and ended up losing, but they gave up a couple rushing touchdowns. So 180 of that 198 was on the ground. So they definitely have to do a better job against the run, especially against this Valhalla rush attack. Brody Corliss had a pick 6 last week. They're going to really have to get after this rush attack of Valhalla, get them behind the chains. And when I look at Valhalla, what really killed them, to me, was the turnovers. They had 3 turnovers last week. Offensively, this has been a strong offensive unit, 24-plus points in 3 straight games. They like to run the ball. They like to be physical with this offensive line. And I think that's what they're going to try to do against Haldane. Rob Foyset has been tremendous. He's been running the ball very efficiently. Their quarterback O'Neal is another guy who can make plays for them and had some impressive throws to guys like Roddy. Defensively, they did struggle versus the pass and even gave up play action passes to Dobbs Ferry. But Haldane is a big running team, so stopping the run has got to be top priority. They do have some defensive backs who have made plays for them, and Berge, I've seen him, but Luke Foyset has been very active in the secondary. Stopping the run is going to be priority number 1. And then see if these secondary guys can hold up in the pass attack. With all that said, this one is a very hard game for me to pick, Mars. At the end of the day, I am going to go with Haldane. I think this is going to be another very close game. I think this is going to come down to the wire. I think Valhalla holds on just long enough. In a tight one, I'm going Haldane.
Yeah, see, this was definitely a hard one for me as well. I feel like the fact that Haldane has been really running the ball well, and that's going to be their main goal. It's going to depend on their offensive line to really step up and really open up some lanes against this very aggressive Valhalla defense. And I feel like that's going to be my key of the game. I think Haldane does really pull this off, and I feel like they are going to be able to move some bodies around. They're going to get their rush offense on the really pushing and moving people around, get that open lanes, get to the outside, make some big plays. take that time of possession in their hands, and I feel like they can just drain this clock out. Valhalla has a lot of skill, guys, a lot of ability, but I feel like Haldane just has too much for them to handle on the rush offensive end. I'm going to go with Haldane.
Go to another really good matchup, Mars. A rematch of last year's section title game. Dobbs Ferry 3-1 at Westlake, who's 4-0. When I look at Dobbs Ferry defensively, the concern for me is stopping the run these last 2 weeks. They've given up an over 100-yard rusher these last two games. And so really a focus in on guys like Marty O'Leary, Maseri, Shimosky, who have made plays for this defense. They're going to have to come up big in this game against a very talented rush attack in Westlake. Offensively, we know they like to run the ball. Harnett is really the big part of it, using their speed to their advantage. But this offensive line is not huge, but they got to be very physical against this Westlake team. Staub, Holman are other guys who can make plays on this offense. But when I look at Westlake, they had a forfeit win last week, so they kind of had a week off of not playing a game. They've scored 35 and 46 the previous 2 weeks offensively, and it's multiple guys making big plays for this offense. Guys like Callie, who's been tremendous all season long, Zino, Pagan, DiNapoli, and there's more of them. But this offensive line versus the Dobbs Ferry defensive front seven, to me, is the matchup to watch. Defensively, last time they gave up over 300 yards passing, but Dobbs Ferry's not a big passing team, right? So can Dobbs Ferry take advantage of that? I'm not sure. But they do play action pass, and that could hurt Westlake at times. So they got to be smart. It starts with stopping the run. Guys like Neely up front, Castellano's made a lot of plays. Prosperino has also been pretty damn tremendous. You've seen him come up the last couple of weeks making huge plays for this Westlake defense. This one was another really hard one for me to pick, but I think Westlake might start off a little bit slow in this game, Lars, because you had that kind of a bye week. Dobbs Ferry had a comeback victory against Haldane, which was very impressive on the road. They got to go on the road again. I'm going to go with the upset. I think Dobbs Ferry wins this game. Now, I'm not saying, we'll see what happens down the line in a potential championship, but I think at this very moment, I think Dobbs Ferry might shock some people. I think they're going to win this game, Mars.
I felt like I was in the middle with this one as well, and mainly because I feel like both teams can really run the ball really overly I mean, they both been impressive. I feel like that's the best way of saying it. And I feel like Westlake having that basically a bye week does get them to kind of not have action. So it means that they might start off a little bit laxed. But even with that being the case, I still think Westlake's going to win, mainly because with a week off, you're going to have a week of rest, a week of basically getting yourself healthy, getting yourself, recovering from the boo-boos of football. And I feel like with that, they're going to have a new sense of energy going into this game, especially against a very tough opponent with Dobbs Ferry. And I think that Westlake's going to win at home.
Let's go to the last C matchup, which is Bronxville 1-3 at Woodlands, who's 0-4. And when I look at Bronxville, they had off last week, similar to what you said. But this run game, I think, is what's really going to dictate. Guys like Patterson, Formato, on the defensive side of the ball, I think they can dominate in the trenches with guys like Mike Cohn and McSherry. Excuse me. So I do think Bronxville comes back with a vengeance. When I look at Woodlands, they had the forfeit last week. Stopping the run is going to be so important against Bronxville, but their size might be too much. But on the defensive side, guys like Locke and Castile, can they make enough plays for this Woodlands team at home? I'm not sure they can. I'm going to go with Bronxville to win this game.
Yeah, I feel like Bronxville has, I think, more balanced of a team. Woodlands is still struggling to me. I feel like I don't know if they would kind of match up well against Bronxville. Their offense is going to be too high powered. I think they're going to be able to move the ball a lot on Woodlands. Defense has been also pretty solid. So I'm going to go with Bronxville here.
All right, guys, now the Hudson Valley Football League, the 3 games left. Let's start with Portchester 2-3 at Tappan Zee, who's 4-1. And Portchester's offense really exploded last week, Mars, scoring 28 points. Now, the problem I have is defensively, they've given up, 24 plus points the last 3 games, and including a couple that were over 30 plus points. So that's concerning to me on the Portchester side. For the Tappan Zee side, defensively, I've been really impressed on the performance they had last week. To me, defense 6 points combined the last 2 weeks. Offensively, they like to balance things out. Guys like Kivalin and O'Hara have made some big plays. So to me, Tappan Zee, I think, had a real statement game last week, and it starts on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to go with Tappan Zee to win at home.
Now, I want to ask, did Tappan Zee call us out? Was it Tappan Zee?
They called me out. They sent that. Yeah, they sent me a message after disrespecting them because I picked Pete Snow. But, they proved me wrong, and you can talk when you prove somebody wrong. And they played very well defensively, a very close game. So I think Tappan Zee continues that.
Well, let's see if Tappan Zee wants to say something to me. I'm going to go with Portchester. I think Portchester, they're going to go with the upset. I know Tappan Zee is at home. I think Portchester is going to have a little bit of a momentum swing. Let's see if Tappan Zee can pull that one off and see if I'm sleeping on them or not. I think Portchester is going to make the little bit of an upset. I'm calling Portchester here.
Let's see. Luke, Umbler, the background.
Okay.
No, I don't think so, Luke. I'm gonna leave. My room is in tip-top shape. Don't worry about it. Let's go to the next one. We got Poughkeepsie 1-5 at Walter Panis, who's 0-5. When I look at Poughkeepsie, I thought the defense played pretty tough last week, Mars. They only allowed 6 points, but the inconsistency with their offense is something that can be concerning. Poughkeepsie, at times, they have moved the ball pretty well, have made some explosive plays, and at times they've struggled to move the ball efficiently. So which offense is going to show? If they play defense like they did last week, they can really make some noise. But at Walter Panis, having the bye week, coming back at home, could have some guys coming back from injury. I think Walter Panis is going to win this game. I know they're kind of forgotten. They've had a bunch of guys go down, including their most important player, their quarterback. But I think Panis comes back and wins this game at home. Might surprise some people, but I think I'm going to go with Panis.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. I feel like when sometimes teams are on a bye week, it actually does help because it gets some guys that were missing because of injury or inaction. Now they can get to come back with full energy, and I will agree with you. Walter Panis will have some guys return. I feel like they're going to make some big plays. I'm going to go Walter Panis.
Last one, Ramapo 1-4 at Peekskill, who's 3-2. There's the last game right here. Let's start with Ramapo. It really starts with their guy Adelson, who's had 7 touchdowns this season at the quarterback spot, throwing and running. Defensively, though, to me is the question: can they slow down? I know Peekskill struggled last week. This high-powered offense, Willis, Michael Perez, Montefleur, they've all made plays for this defense. They're really going to have to come up big for Ramapo to win this game. When I look at Peekskill, I think this offense can really get back on track. They've scored 30-plus points 3 straight games until last week, where they were just a bit discombobulated. They couldn't finish drives. Defensively, though, 14 or less points allowed in all 5 games this year. Defense wins out. Peekskill's offense gets back on track. I'm going with Peekskill.
Yeah, I feel like Peekskill's offense, I know that they have been consistent for most of the season. I feel like they're going to have a kind of a big showing here. The offensive line needs to step up big time. I'm going to go with Peekskill as well.
All right, Mars, that was all the games, guys. Thank you guys so much. As always, I don't see any other pending questions, so I will leave it at that. If you guys missed anything, don't worry. We're going to post this on it. You can go back and check out our game picks, as well as other stuff that we've said on the show. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you hit that thumbs up and hit that subscribe button before you guys head out. Appreciate you guys as always. Hope you guys have a great sports weekend, and we'll see you all very soon.